Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever live edition of the Alder Hour, your new favourite way to end your working day. So it's 8 p.m. in the UK, it's 9 p.m. in Europe, it's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, and midday on the West Coast. I'm Matt Alder. I'm probably best known as the host of the Recruiting Future podcast. And I thought it's about time I stepped out from behind the anonymous microphone of podcasting and did some live video. This show is part of the Purple Acorn Network. So if you want to know more, head over to purpleacornnetwork.com at the end of the show. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. And this episode will also be available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Without further ado, I would like you to meet my two amazing co-hosts. Hey, Jocelyn. Hey, Rhona. Welcome to our first live show. Why don't we start by just doing some introductions, as it's the first time we've been live. So, Jocelyn, just give us a quick intro to you and what you do. Oh, we can't hear you. I can't hear you.
There we go. I'm sorry.
It's live. We proved it's live. There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Not the first time that's happened. My name is Jocelyn King, and I'm the CEO and founder of an employment and labor law compliance technology company called Virtual HR. I've been in HR my entire career and function as a generalist. I've kind of touched on everything, which has been really fun. And I'm really excited just to kind of share any words of wisdom and advice that I can along the way.
Fantastic. And tell us what you've got coming up in your segment. Give us a little tease of what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about whether or not it is okay for another employee to go to HR on your behalf.
Fantastic. Rhona, same for you. Please introduce yourself. Tell us what you got coming up.
Yeah, so I'm Rhona Pierce. I'm the founder and CEO of Perceptible Studios. It's a video content marketing agency. We work with talent teams to help them scale their impact through video and content creation. My experience has been mostly in tech, leading TA teams at talent marketplaces and SaaS companies and media companies as well, and really focusing on like talent attraction, personal branding, employer branding. And I also have a podcast called Throw Out the Playbook, where we talk about like modern, non-BS ways to attract and retain talent. And then today, I'm so excited. We're talking about the new trend that's going on of hiring influencers full-time for companies.
No, that should be a really interesting conversation. Now, we are live, and you may have noticed already we've got some comments shooting across the screen. So please join in, leave us a comment, say hello as we get into the content. Please give us your thoughts on it, and we'll sort of try and pick up on those and incorporate them into the show. So this is your chance to be live on the show with us, and we're really looking forward to having a conversation with you. And at that point, it's time for Points and Pints. Okay, now, in this section of the show, because it's 8 o'clock in the evening in the UK, and many of you are also at the end of your work day, I'm going to open a beer while discussing a couple of interesting things that kind of come our way. So my beer this week, it's an alcohol-free beer because I have to drive home from this studio and I'm very responsible. It's Beavertown Laser Crush. Now, Beavertown is quite a well-known UK brewery, and this is their alcohol-free IPA. Now, I'm going to open this live on air, and I'm going to hope that it doesn't spray everywhere, and it hasn't. So I'm going to pour myself a drink, and we're going to get to the first pint. The first point. So it's not quite a pint, but it'll do for now. And it is amazing. Okay, so the first point, this is something that I've seen a couple of articles come out about this in the last week or so. So Klarna plans to halve its workforce, replacing over 1,000 jobs with AI. Some of you might remember that earlier in the year, Klarna, which is a European fintech company, hit the headlines because they they built a chat GPT bot for customer service. And they felt that this bot was able to replace the jobs of 700 people. And at the time, huge debate about whether this was a good thing, what would happen, is this the way forward, all of that kind of stuff. Now, 6, 7, 8, 9 months later, it appears that it is the way forward. So, just some kind of stats that have come up from what they did. I'm juggling screens here. So, the technology handles 2/3 of their customer service queries about returns, refunds, cancellations, and payments. They had 2.3 million AI conversations in the first month. They slashed the average time needed to resolve a customer query to 2 minutes from 7 minutes, and reduced repeat inquiries by 25%. The AI agent functions in 35 languages and is going to boost their profits by $40 million. Not only that, they're also using it in their marketing, and they've saved $10 million of marketing spend by using AI. Not only that, they've also come out and said they're going to scrap Salesforce, their payroll system, and lots of the other SaaS software they use, and they're going to replace it with AI. So the implications for HR and TA here are absolutely enormous. And you could argue that this is perhaps an edge case, but today's edge cases are tomorrow's reality. And in this AI world, things move very, very quickly. So to me, we are having the wrong conversation in TA and HR at the moment. We're talking about AI adoption, what's going to happen, all that kind of stuff. We need to talk about what TA and HR looks like in the post-AI world, because this is being driven by the CEO of this business. And I've seen a number of articles in the business and financial press in the last few weeks about companies using AI for efficiency, for cost purposes, for innovation purposes. So the decisions about whether AI automates or replaces bits of TA and HR are not in our control. These are being driven by the C-suite. So, we need to be really putting the case about what does AI and HR look like in the post-AI world. How do we add value? That's the conversation we should be having rather than the conversation that we're having now. So this should be a massive wake-up call, because Klarna have now said, on top of the 700 customer service jobs that they eliminated or they didn't hire for, I'm not quite sure how it worked, they want to halve the size of their company. So they want to reduce their company by another 1,000 jobs because of AI. So, not only is that the implication there around, what's going to happen to TA and HR, also that's less people to hire for. So huge, huge implications. And I know that, very often when technology comes along, we have a lot of hype about it. This is the first time that I can remember or that I've ever seen where the hype is becoming reality in real time. And I think that, I'm amazed that more people aren't talking about this, because this is a massive, massive, massive thing as far as I'm concerned. What do you guys think? Rhona, Jocelyn, what's your thoughts on this? And everyone else, please, please comment please comment and let's talk about it.
I think from a TA perspective, there's many ways to look at it, and they've put out a lot of stats that you read. They haven't spoken about their NPS scores. So me as a recruiter, the only thing I'm thinking is, okay, how am I going to keep these people warm? Because whenever it starts impacting other parts of the business, it's going to be this hire fast, let's get this going back again really quick. So I think for TA people, it's really when we need to focus on relationship building, keeping our networks warm, and just really nurturing and doubling down on that. And then as far as our jobs, which are clearly impacted, being more than just a tactical recruiter and being very strategic, knowing all of the goals that companies have and really knowing how to tie it back to our work.
Absolutely. Jocelyn, what do you think?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First, when it comes to how it might impact HR as a position, you look at this right here. They went from 3,800 to 2,000. They're definitely laying off HR as well. They don't need as many HR professionals if their workforce is declining. So it's something that HR, and Rhona, like I totally agree with you when it comes to strategy, right? This is an opportunity for HR to be less tactical and more strategic across the business. I don't know if it necessarily means that there need to be less HR professionals if they're able to provide strategic value to an organization in a way that shows real ROI. So that's one piece. But I also think here HR really needs to think about their role in this entire situation. We need to look at how we can better train our workforce to prepare for these types of layoffs and prepare for the fact that jobs are going to change. Like, you think about, a laundress having, doing the job as a laundress, decades ago, and then the washing machine came around and there was no need for a laundress anymore. But that didn't mean that all of a sudden there was this massive unemployment. It just meant that we needed to revisit and reshape the way that we work and the types of jobs that we have, and HR plays a crucial role in that. So you're totally right, Matt. When it comes to talking about the what ifs and more what's happening today, HR needs to be on top of that because it's already a reality.
No, absolutely. And someone asked a question about the AI tools that they were using, the cost of the tools, and who was kind of managing that. And the interesting thing is they've actually hired more technology people. So, they're hiring, they're becoming that sort of AI technology business. So yes, new jobs are being created, but those new jobs have a very different skill set, and there aren't as many of them as the people who are being replaced. So, how's this going to end up? I think that's the interesting question. But I think what we have to look at is, when this kind of broke in January, that they were going to use this for customer service, we were hearing the same kind of things. It's like, well, this isn't going to work. What about this? What about this? And obviously it has. And, obviously they're now taking that a step further. So it's a really interesting case study. And as I say, I think it's that wake up call that we have to be talking about how we operate strategically, the value that we bring as a function, and all the things that TA and HR can do to enhance this kind of strategy. Because, as soon as this starts appearing in the business press, then people want to copy this, particularly in the economies that we're in now across the world, and with the drive for efficiency and stuff like that. So, to me, it's a kind of a real wake up call. Perfect. So, let's move on to the next one. I'll have a drink of my lovely Laser Crush IPA as we do that. It really is very good. I'm not a brand ambassador for Beavertown, but I would thoroughly recommend it. I don't know whether it's available outside of the UK. Okay, the next one. I hate HR too. Epic distrust wrecks employee relations with people managers. Now, this is based on a survey of 1,000 people. And basically what it says is that essentially people don't trust HR. They see HR as the kind of the evil sneaky department that's going to double cross them or use information against them, or just they're not going to be able to have those types of conversations. Now, it's a survey of 1,000 people. I don't know how they did that sample. It's very, very fair to say that this is not the case in every organization. And I'm sure there are some brilliant I know that there are some brilliant HR people watching, listening, who have a great relationship and do great things. But I think there are some interesting points that we can sort of really pick up on here. The first one is that HR is very much in the firing line for this kind of thing. I can think of there was an example in Europe last year where a ferry company laid off pretty much its entire ship workforce in the middle of a shift and replaced them with temporary workers on about half the salary. And the person who did that was the HR person doing it via Zoom. And they were the ones who ended up on the TV channels and all that kind of stuff. It was almost like it was that person's fault. But really, they were just doing their job and being told to say what they were going to say. So HR always in the kind of firing line. Very often CEOs and such like seem to hide behind their HR people. Perhaps also there's a misunderstanding of what HR does and its kind of role in the business. I think that could be part of it as well. But also there's obviously an issue, the PR issue here that needs to be fixed. Whether it's whether it's right or wrong or just or unjust, people do feel like this, and I've seen a number of other posts and comments, even from people I know who don't work in this sector. Be careful about what you say to HR. Be careful about what you say in your performance review. So this is a real thing, and it's something that as an industry we have to address. Jocelyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. And interestingly, I've seen more and more posts come up about the level of distrust that employees have for HR professionals. And it makes me really sad. One of the topics that comes up very often is that HR is not your friend. HR is there to protect the company and not the employee. And I think being an HR professional is walking that fine line between both. And that comes with building a level of trust, not just with upper leadership in the organization, but with the workforce as a whole as well. And so when we have, HR professionals that just aren't, communicating or performing the way that they should with employees, it creates this type of situation. And unfortunately, it creates a significant amount of liability for the business as well, because employees aren't coming forward when there are employee relations issues that arise, and instead, maybe walk away and just sue the company instead. So we really want to build this culture of transparency. And I know the open door policy is talked about a lot, maybe sometimes too much, but it is really important for employees to feel that level of trust. And so, so if it's not there, then the company sees really negative consequences. And I would encourage leaders at an organization and CEOs out there to really ensure that they're hiring the right HR folks that are going to build that type of culture for their organization.
Rhona, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jocelyn and with what you've said. I've said it for a long time. We have a perception problem. And I really think it comes down to all of the things you guys said, but also we're always like never talking about the things that we do. We're more like, because of the size of our teams and so many factors, let's just get some shit done. That type of mentality, heads down, get stuff done. And we don't really talk about all of the other things that we do and the why behind the things that we do. I call it transparent visibility. I think that's something that we really need to work on as a function. And that comes with really hiring people that know, that, like Jocelyn said, are good, know what they're doing, but also know how to talk about it in a way where people can see what we do. And that's the only way to chip at that perception.
Absolutely. And there was a comment that someone made a second ago about, companies investing in building their employees' knowledge of what people do and what their, and what their role is. And I think that, that's a kind of a key part of it too, isn't it? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it's it's interesting. I think it's something that's gonna run. And as I say, a lot of it not necessarily HR's fault, but it's kind of HR's problem to fix. It's a bit of a situation, so it's time to take it to the situation room. Jocelyn, take it away. What do you have for us?
Hey, Matt. Yes. So this is an Am I the Asshole type post on Reddit. And essentially what's happened, and it's in really small print, so I'm just going to summarize it for everybody. Basically, there's a woman who's at work. She went to lunch with a few female coworkers. There are more females than males at the company. And she and one of her colleagues, who she's good friends with, were kind of complaining about one of the male coworkers who interrupts them all the time, kind of speaks over them. And this woman was just kind of frustrated about it. And she recognizes that she probably shouldn't have expressed her frustrations in front of the entire group, but nonetheless, she did. And there's one female coworker who is in the group who she doesn't like very much, who's kind of a drama queen, essentially. And this woman approached her, after lunch and said, "Hey, I scheduled a meeting with HR. I told them about your issues with this male coworker, and they want to meet with you." And she refused to go because she said, "I don't have an issue like that with him. I don't think he's treating me this way because I'm a woman. I think this is just his personality and he's obnoxious." And so HR came and found her and pulled her into the office and had a conversation with her about it. And, she told them the same thing. So what she was upset about was, this woman came to HR on my behalf and just kind of said whatever she felt like she needed to say. And, this is a situation where she's not an asshole at all. In fact, the other woman is. That woman should have never been going to HR on her behalf without speaking to her. This was not a situation where there was discrimination or harassment that was occurring in the workplace or some type of illegal behavior. This was just a venting situation. And I think the coworker who went to HR just likes creating drama. There are moments, however, where it might be appropriate for somebody to approach HR, even if it's on your behalf. And that's when there is sexual harassment, discrimination, or some type of illegal activity happening. So there is such thing as third-party harassment. If you're being sexually harassed and somebody else witnesses it, they're also being harassed. It's third-party harassment. They have every right to go to HR and complain for themselves. But if they were to go to HR and not tell you that they were going on your behalf, I feel like that's just unprofessional. It's probably something that you want to have a conversation with about that individual. And if they don't feel, if they're being harassed in some way, but they don't feel comfortable bringing it up with HR, then, at the end of the day, I do think that you need to respect that person's decision. Unless, of course, there's illegal activity happening, in which case it would behoove the individual to have that conversation with HR. So in most circumstances, this would be totally wrong, but there are some outliers out there.
No, absolutely. And I think in this case, it almost feels like, it's this massive breach of trust and, not quite bullying, but it's a really, it is a kind of a really negative thing to do that to someone else, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, what this woman did was really disrespectful, in my opinion. You can't just go report something like that, especially when there wasn't anything egregious happening in the first place. This woman was clearly just venting about the fact that this man interrupts people. And so, it just can't be tolerated in the workplace. And I really do hope that this woman goes back to that coworker and kind of very respectfully gives her a piece of her mind.
Do you think it's kind of HR's role in a case like this to actually push back and say, we need to hear it from this person? You shouldn't be, coming on someone's behalf and telling us how someone feels unless they've asked you to. Is there a role for HR to kind of push back in these types of circumstances?
In this specific type of circumstance, yes, this is clearly just gossip, and HR shouldn't tolerate that. And they should let that individual know, hey, unless this person comes forward, there's nothing we can do. Why don't you go have a conversation with her, or, maybe keep to yourself. When it is something that is illegal, like harassment or discrimination, for example, then HR has to take that very seriously. And despite that individual not having come forward, they would need to approach that person and have the conversation. And more than likely in this specific case, HR might have assumed that this was a discrimination issue against her because she was female, which is probably why they approached her. And that would have been appropriate if that was kind of the concern that they had.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one of the other things in here, in the very tiny writing, was the person who posted it was in some way worried or suspicious about HR. Going back to our original point about I hate HR, can we trust HR, all that sort of stuff. And there was a comment flew across the screen a couple of minutes ago from Brian Fink that said, do employees view HR as being adversarial? I can't even say that. Adversarial. Much non-alcoholic beer. That's the trouble. What do you think? How does this sort of tie into our previous conversation?
Yeah, it does go back to trust, right? And so HR needs to foster a culture of trust and fairness, and have a sense of good judgment with things. So, if HR was equally involved in gossip, which unfortunately does happen, then I could see why somebody like this individual wouldn't want to come forward. But I did get the impression in reading this post, Matt, that it felt more like she didn't want to cause trouble for the male coworker more than anything else.
Yeah,
and she was scared that by going to HR, she would do that.
And is there a culture thing here as well? Because I remember, I worked for an organization once where HR was kind of almost seen as this kind of parent figure, and people were reporting things to HR or complaining to HR all the time, which was so different from the previous company that I'd been in, where people were just kind of sorting out a lot of their own problems and obviously escalating anything that was illegal or bad or whatever. But the HR team seemed to just kind of really encourage that, because they would just they'd take those things up and start calling people in saying, someone's complained about this, what do you think? So is there a cultural thing? Is there something that HR does that can cause these kind of issues?
I generally think it's a lack of training in employee relations that causes that to happen. HR really should be encouraging employees, unless, again, it's a legal issue, they should be encouraging employees to problem solve on their own. They shouldn't necessarily be involved in that dialogue between the two unless it's become hostile in some way. So mentorship is really, really important for HR. And taking that role as a mentor is a way that that they can facilitate that type of culture. But yeah, unfortunately, they don't always have that type of training, and that's why it's really important for HR leaders to take it upon themselves to train their HR professionals on how to be the very best that they can be. Right? And this would be part of it.
No, absolutely. Jocelyn, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. Fascinating conversation as ever. Now I believe it's time to talk to a guest. Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Hello, Matt. It's lovely to see you. I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Well, it's lovely to speak to you again. You were on my podcast about a year ago. Was it a year ago? It seems like a little
I
while
think it was
ago.
more than a year ago, actually.
No
It was
way.
2 years ago. Yeah.
Time flies. Well, thanks very much for being a guest on our first live show. It's absolutely brilliant to have you here. So,
Pleasure.
just to kick us off, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yes, so I'm Debby Clement. I'm VP of Global Talent Acquisition for Pax8. Pax8 is a cloud software marketplace relationship management platform, and we help more than 600,000 small businesses turn their dreams into reality through the power of technology, and using more than 37,000 partners. So we are a software business. We're 1,800 people strong now, operating in more than 17 countries and 20 offices.
Wow. And what's the kind of scale of your hiring? How many people are you hiring a year? What are your that kind of stuff?
I checked the stats last week, actually. We do. I call them hiring cycles
Okay.
because we do internal and external as well. So we're about 700 hiring cycles in a year. And we're just going through the headcount planning for next year, which is always an interesting process, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can understand that. It's a kind of crazy time in technology as well, isn't it?
Nuts, absolutely nuts. I came in on your last conversation about the Klarna, which I saw last week. So fascinated about that and where it's taking us. All sorts of questions. Who has the answers? I don't think anybody does, do they?
No, exactly. And are you seeing other conversations like that going on in the sector?
Yes, yeah, and of course we are ourselves putting AI products and services through our platform onto other businesses. And I was in meetings this week with partners selling those AI products to businesses, and they were saying things like they're not ready with their data yet. They need to have data cleaning AI stuff first before they go down. So same kind of problem that we're going to have when we move our HR and TA infrastructure into that. We're like, what data are we using? How?
No, exactly. I mean, as you say, it throws up a lot of questions that their CEO didn't really answer in their kind of PR earnings call that it came out.
No.
So, talk us through what are the kind of the big challenges that you've got at the moment in hiring or in your hiring process, or what's your kind of focus? What are the challenges that you're dealing with?
So, as a global organisation, we have just brought, we've got about 90 people in our people operations structure totally across all the different areas, and we are moving to a new centre of excellence structure. So we've had 3 operating regions, and we're now going to a sort of corporate structure and assembling all of those in a centre of excellence. So we're going to have 3 regional HR business partnering, centre of excellence in the middle, and then also supported by employee experience and also the systems side of it as well. And I sit within the centre of excellence, which is talent acquisition, talent management, learning and development, and total rewards as well. So that's
fantastic. And I'll pick up on that again a little bit later, because that's one of the things that we talked about on the podcast, that kind of that merging of different parts of the talent organization.
Yes.
Before that, just a little bit about hiring, because I know you wanted to talk about de-risking in the hiring process. What's your kind of take on that? What is your hiring process? How do you sort of make it the best that it can be?
So this is the challenge that I'm working on at the moment. So I was recently 8 weeks ago made the global VP of talent acquisition, and I'd come from the EMEA side of things. And when you bring 3 regions together, you have 3 different potentially ways of operating. So my question is, how do we make the most of our hiring process? How do we take the process that we've built in EMEA, which is very, very solid and very precision focused, and how do we scale that into America, for example, and then how do we take on the regional nuances of APAC as well? And there's some really interesting dynamics, like in EMEA you might get 8 applications for a job advert. In America you get 800 in 24 hours. So applying the different scopes. So and it really goes down to what's the recruitment process, and I think from us we've got 55 separate work streams in EMEA. In Americas, they've grown organically. How do we take one and move it over to the other? But how do we accommodate those 800 CVs overnight? Because the CV that is the biggest challenge I think that we're facing at the moment. How do you screen and how do you mine those CVs? How do you automate that? How do you make it really, really efficient, but not lose talent in that process? That's the thing that's keeping me awake at night at the moment. But yes, mapping the recruitment process, 55 separate work streams, who's involved. And it's been interesting because I don't know whether anybody out there has a RACI, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed for every single step of your recruitment process. If you don't have one of those, time to do those. You'll unearth some really surprising nuggets about where you've got inefficiencies, what's not working, who's uncoupled from another space that makes things efficient, that where you've got process inefficiencies or process black points where you lose people in the process, that kind of thing. And does everybody really know what their role is? Is your service catalogue really tight? Do you know what your service levels are? All that kind of stuff. Do your TAs all interview in the same manner, in the same structure? And it's definitely not the case when you pull 3 regions together, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. So what was that acronym again? Sorry, to talk us through that again.
The RACI.
Yes.
Yeah. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. So every single piece of your recruitment process, soup to nuts. 93 different stages potentially, 55 separate work streams. Who does it? Who's responsible for what? And you'll see those handoff moments that get people lost, and especially big challenge in the pre-boarding and onboarding process. That's where a lot of things kind of tend to fall down as well. But upfront, intake briefs, who does what, who does the job descriptions. Sometimes it's a real melee of it's everybody, but actually it's nobody. So yeah,
interesting.
Tons of stuff.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is that recruitment processes and people's view on what recruitment processes should be haven't changed for decades. So there must be this kind of these sort of legacy views that you have to deal with about how recruitment should be done and whose responsibility it is. And I suppose some of those are kind of unspoken, which is where some of the sort of inefficiencies and problems might occur, particularly across different regions.
Yeah. And I also did some presentations to some of our partners this week, helping them to recruit, because they get the same problem. And the phrase I use is, look, most people have a process for filling up the fridge, building the cookie jar, putting beer in the fridge and the fruit basket. But no one has an end-to-end recruitment process. For many organizations, it's a smattering of activity. It's not a seamless handoff from piece to piece to piece to piece, and that is our problem. So when when you get something that goes wrong, the diagnostics of understanding which bit is failing here. Is it the job ad? Was it the intake brief? Is it the resources that we're using? Are we using the right job boards? All of those kind of things. You can't diagnose really, really efficiently and quickly. And then the other challenge always is our hiring managers. I'm perhaps generalizing, but I think generally management today is a lot greener than it was maybe 10 years ago. The training and the investment in those managers, the experience just isn't there. So they don't always know what good looks like. And
no, exactly. And I suppose to kind of reflect back on what we talked about over a year ago on the podcast, you're talking about the recruitment process, onboarding, all that kind of stuff. Where does it stop? Where does that stop? Because obviously you're responsible for lots of different bits of things that would be seen as silos kind of in the past. How does that work together? How should people think about talent in a more holistic way?
Oh, well, we are going through a really interesting time at the moment. So we are about to lift and shift into Workday. Currently, we're on an applicant tracking system that's not moving into Workday just yet. I'm holding back. I'm holding back, saying we're not going there just yet. We're not ready.
I'm sure that will resonate with lots of people listening, but watching even. Yes.
We've had one lift and shift from a lovely little platform called CoMeet into Greenhouse. That has been a major challenge, and then we're going to face another probably lift later on this year to go potentially into Workday. But because of the AI agenda, not sure whether we're going to go there just yet. Want to see how that's going to develop. But to your point about where does it start and where does it finish, talent partners, as we call our people, it doesn't stop when the hire lands in the seat. It's still going 6 months and a year later. Have they passed their 6-month probation? Have they had that first promotion in year one? How are they impacting the business? What was their focal review? So we're looking at all those kind of things as from our talent partners, and that's the feedback. And they need that feedback because they want to know that they're always doing a good job. Otherwise, it becomes very transactional, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. From the candidate to employee perspective, they're just experiencing one process, and if it's disjointed because of silos, then that's never a good thing for anyone, really.
Yeah.
As a final question, just give us a vision for the future. What do you think? We've got AI, we've got all these kind of things going on. Where do you hope we'll be in a few years' time?
So I don't know if anyone read the it was an article called "The Last Recruiter." It was from, I can't remember the name of the chap. He's very well known in the ERE space. Can't remember his name now, but
was it Kevin Wheeler?
I think it was Kevin Wheeler.
Yeah, I did read that one. Yeah.
Did you read that one? So that's where I feel it can definitely go. Question in my head is, what if everyone could interview for every job that they wanted? Click to interview right here. What if every interview was a really personalized experience where the AI and the talent partner worked together to uncover the whole human and not just the half a human that does the job?
Amazing.
Then wouldn't that be amazing? That's where I think we're going to go.
Let's hope so, because that is amazing. Debbie, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely to see you finally in person.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, Rhona.
Hey.
Tell us everything. Tell us everything.
So today we're talking about the office influencer. I saw an article LinkedIn News did with their 25 big ideas for next year. And one of the things that they mentioned is that companies are hiring dedicated, like full-time influencers and content creators to do their like day in the life vlogs and behind the scenes and Q&As with team members and things like that. And it's not just for employer branding purposes, but just in general for like product and everything that they do. So on one end, and they're doing it because Gen Z is out there as consumers, as employees, and they crave the authenticity and the authentic content. And it's nothing new, right? EGC, employee generated content, has been around for a long time. I come from the tech industry where companies have been embracing this for years. There's been like developer advocates and so many people whose job is to build community around the product. And really the only way to build community at scale is through content creation. So it's not necessarily a new thing. It's new that more companies and non-tech companies are adopting this. But it makes me think, and I believe in the power of EGC. Had an episode on my podcast recently with Nicole Stevens talking about how to build employee advocacy programs and focus on EGC. The beauty of it was the multiple voices that you get to hear. So my thing is, because it always used to be like a volunteer basis, who wants to do this? And there's someone running the program, but it really relied on the voices, the authentic voices of employees. If you have one person whose job is to do this now, are we going back into corporate-y type content? Like, how do they keep it fresh? So to me, it really boils down like, is this trend going away anytime soon? Absolutely not. Gen Z and just everything in the market dictates for authenticity. The thing is really going to be, are companies going to hire the right influencer to do this? Because they have to be people that are going to be able to build community internally and bring people and the multiple voices for this to, they're going to lead the charge in it, right? They can't be the only face of the company type of thing. So I'm interested to know, what does everyone in the chat think? And Matt, what about you? Is this trending or ending?
I have so many questions. I have so many questions. Is this actually happening? Do we have examples of companies that have actually done this? They've hired influencers specifically to talk about the business.
Yes, they mentioned in the article Teal, which is a HR tech company for all. I think that's how they would classify themselves, and they have a dedicated influencer. Her title is Office Influencer, and she creates content for them, and she edits it, keeps up on trends and stuff like that. That's a smaller company, so I think you can still get that authenticity and like everyone on board with it. I don't know how that would work at larger companies, but they did mention some larger companies that are also doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I kind of really buy into what you said about if they're doing this. It's kind of like, obviously the skill set here is to train other people to do it as well, because it can't really be authentic with just one person, producing fantastic content. I mean, to answer your earlier question, I think it's probably trending, but it's just, what form does that take in? So what skill set do you think someone doing that job would need to have?
In my opinion, they really need to be good at program management and project management and community building. I can think of people like in our space that are now doing this. Taylor Desson, he's at Torque. It's a talent marketplace. I used to work at a talent marketplace doing something similar, but really my job was to get other people on board to do it and organize. So it's really a like project program management, but you also have to be good at content.
Yeah, and Nikki just made a point there about different perspectives rather than this kind of like mono view of kind of what's going on. Is there a danger here as well? Because the reason I say that is there obviously I don't know, sort of 18 months ago there was a lot of life in the day content. So I work for a tech company. Here I am doing yoga at 4 a.m. Now I'm off to have my breakfast and all this kind of stuff. And when a lot of those companies made layoffs, there was a kind of a bit of a backlash of people picking up on that type of content and saying, well, I'm not surprised they're not doing very well because people are just, they're not working. They're doing all this other crazy stuff. What do you think? Is there a risk here? Is that fair? What are your thoughts?
I think the risk is when you don't balance authenticity, because a lot of this day in the life content is like really cool. I see people do a day in the life when they're at a conference. Look, you don't go to
Yeah.
conferences every day. That's not a day in your life. Now, some people's job it is to do that. So that makes sense. But for the regular employee, most people aren't going to conferences every day. They aren't going to coffee and all of that. So yes, it does. There are some risk, but there's also the risk of companies that go the other way and do like very strict guidelines. And then it doesn't sound like the employees, and people can tell. So it's
Mm,
like
mm,
finding that balance and finding the right people. I think the other risk is also if you have someone whose job is to do this, then the other people who are doing it as a side thing are going to be like, well, if I'm not getting paid to do this content, why am I doing it?
mm. Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is if someone is doing this and they have a huge following on, TikTok or LinkedIn or whatever it is, and the company feels that they really shift the needle in terms of what they're trying to do, whether that's the employer brand or even what the company's doing or selling. Do you think we'll get to this stage where people are kind of sort of headhunting and recruiting influencers just because of the size of their audience and their influence? Is that likely to be a thing?
I've seen that happen already in tech. I'm talking 2019. This was already happening in tech. I think the danger in that is more on the content creator side. I'm very protective of my audience and what I've built, and it would honestly take a ton of money for me to even consider saying, "Okay, my audience is now yours." I'm
Mm.
always gonna post my so it's a very, very tricky situation, and I think content creators have to really think about the whole, yes, this is a steady paycheck per se, but what are you really giving up? And really line those things out. Can you take brand deals and do all these other things, or are you locked in and tied into this company?
I suppose there's a flip side to that as well. Is if you're an employer and you have an influencer working for you, and they've built up an audience, their audience grows. Then could the employer argue that actually, well, this is the audience that we invested in, so you can't take that with you. Except they can, because this is all about personality and engagement. So how does that work from an employer perspective, do you think?
I think employers really have to be realistic about that and understand that what you're paying for is the person's ability to build community, not their subscribers, not their followers. Because if you get into that mentality, you're, it's going to be a frustrating situation because people leave jobs. That's a given. It happens. You need to focus on community building and those types of metrics because that's really what you own.
Yeah, I think, and I suppose to ask a bit about, yeah, Rona is the best. That's absolutely right.
Thanks.
To kind of get into the kind of the best practice bit of this. So, I had a client I worked with a few years ago, big engineering company, and they did a great thing. They did this kind of these Instagram takeovers where they had someone from a different department doing a week in the life of. So you got something from them every day. It seemed much more authentic about what their working week was, because there was a day they were at home, there was a day they were at a conference. It wasn't this beautifully packaged up thing about this is my perfect day, and that seemed to work quite well. What would best practice look like here for companies who wanted to do this or wanted to create this? What would your advice be?
Really focus on the value that you're trying to get out. When you hire this person, yes, you're hiring someone who knows content, who knows content creation and trends and stuff like that, but you're truly hiring a program manager to lead this in your company so that it's beyond what they as a person bring to the table and really what they're setting up and what they're creating within the company. That's how I see it working.
Absolutely. And someone made a comment a bit earlier about, we used to call these people brand ambassadors.
Yeah. Yeah, the name changes. But I think it's going to stay around because it's what the market is dictating. I think companies have to be very strategic about who they hire. It's not just the person who has the most followers or creates the best content. It's really the value that's going to be brought to your company. Yes, that's important, but what are your goals with this role?
Yeah, and I think I suppose the other point on this is about content creation. That actually, to do it properly and to do it professionally, as you know, it's a skill set all of its own. It's a skill set that doesn't exist in a lot of companies.
Yeah. And then there's this other thing because some companies are trying to get this in one person, right? So with my company, companies hire me to do this, right? So I have a full team behind me. Yes, can I edit videos? Do I know trends and all of that? 100%. But if it were my job to run a program, create the content, edit, do all of this, that's many jobs in one. So companies have to give them realistic targets and give them the support that they need. It's not just one person doing everything. They need a team.
Yeah, because I remember a few years ago, I had someone on the podcast who had a very small talent acquisition team. They were in a startup, and they had a choice of who they were going to hire next. And they actually hired a videographer because they wanted that content. But these days, just hiring a videographer, that's not going to cut it, is it? Just because it is so complex, as you say.
Yeah, you need, I can just talk about my team and how I mirror it. You need a strategist, you need someone who's keeping up on the trends, you need video editors. And yeah, I don't think so much of a videographer because shooting the footage, everyone has an iPhone, or a lot of people do. I won't say everyone has an iPhone, but a lot of people do, and they have smartphones with really good cameras. So really that isn't the barrier. It's more
Yeah.
of like, all of the things that they're doing, is it really the best use of their time and the ROI for you to have this one person responsible of doing the job of 20 people? Are they going to burn out and are they just going to leave? Because it's very different to be a content creator for yourself. And also, good content creators and good influencers can make more money on their own from brand deals than they can with working full time at a company. That's just realistic. So you really need to be sure about why you're hiring this person, what you want them there to do, what are the goals, give them the support so they don't just burn out and leave.
Rhona, thank you very much for your insights as ever. Fascinating topic. I'm going to say it's trending.
Amazing. So do I. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So that brings us to the end of the first live show. Thank you very much to Jocelyn and Rhona for their fantastic contributions. Thank you to Debby for being an amazing guest. And thank you to everyone who's watched and all of you who made comments. It kind of really makes a massive difference to know people are there and get to engage with you. Lots more coming up from Purple Acorn. So first of all, always make sure you tune into the HR Morning Show, which is Tuesday mornings, 7 a.m. PST, 10 a.m. EST. Hire Her, a Talent Collective podcast, which is Wednesdays, 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. We also have coming up My First Job with Mike Wood, which I think debuted last week. That's on Thursdays, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Look at me getting these US time zone slang things right. We only have one time zone in my country, so I get very confused by this. And anyway, and of course, we will be back next Monday. So if you want to find out more, see more from Purple Acorn, head over to Purple Acorn Network.com. You can find us on Spotify. And this is Matt Alder clocking out.